Welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's really great to see you, and gratitude for y'all taking the time to be here today. As you arrive, please put your name, role, organization, and city into the chat, just so we can get a sense for who's here. That would be lovely. I know some of us know each other, some of us don't. Some of us are more steeped in this work than others, so I'll do it as an example. Seth, Linden, Gather Consulting, Long Beach, California. Awesome. Right on. Dana from San Francisco, Jeffrey, New Orleans. Awesome. Mickey, San Francisco. Welcome. Welcome. As you're doing this, this is the second session of this kind of re-upped BoardTalk Governing in Crisis. And I'd love to just take a moment or a minute of silence for the violence and the lost lives in Israel, Palestine. So just do that. All right. So again, it's great to see some familiar faces. It's great to see some new faces here today. For those who don't know me, I'm Seth Linden. I'm the founder and principal of Gather Consulting, where I am a philanthropy advisor and a leadership consultant. My other hats are I'm the board chair of Jewish Studio Project, and I'm lucky to serve as a board member with Becky and Imani. I'm a board member of Jewish Long Beach, which is our three-headed Federation Foundation JCC monster in Long Beach. I'm the father of two boys. I'm a husband, I'm a friend, I'm a community member. And again, for those who are new, BoardTalk is a space to share ideas and resources around nonprofit governance and to connect and learn with and from other board members. We've been doing this since COVID. We're relaunching now. And just like two words or lines of framing, I'm a big believer that boards are a community of learners, a community of leaders. They're a cohort. They're a staple. A colleague once shared her reference that boards to her were a staple of democracy. And boards have a responsibility to step up now, as always, and we need them now more than ever. So I think these conversations are more important today. As I said on my last talk, in crisis, there's danger and there's opportunity. I think and I hope there's a lot of opportunity here with leaders such as yourselves and those whose boards you sit on. And I just want to make clear a couple things. One, what this is not, this hour will not be education or advocacy on Israel, Palestine, or on Hamas and Gaza. What this is will be education and advocacy for effective governance, for good decision-making, for strong leadership models, policies, and values. So we are extremely lucky to have Imani Chapman and Becky Silverstein with us here today. So thank you in advance. I'm going to give you all I'm going to give you your kavod and some intro shortly. But before we do that, for those who've been here, I'd like to just do a quick 5-minute breakout in Chavruta in pairs, just so you can introduce yourself one-on-one to someone who's on this call, share why you're here, what you hope to learn. If you need a prompt or two, I'll put those in the chats. You can say how you're doing as a human and how you're doing as a nonprofit leader. And again, since this is a solo shop right here, we're just going to do this real quick. I think we're going to do 4 breakout rooms. We're going to assign manually, and there we go. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, maybe 6, chat, get to know one another, and then we'll see you back here. Sound good? Okay. Miriam Grant is actually here. Oh, and we have one more coming in a little late. Well, welcome, Miriam. Welcome, Ari.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and Franny Silverman. Oh my gosh, all these great folks just hopping on. We like to, in the JSP world, thank our Chavruta partner. So feel free to shoot a quick note of thanks in the chat to whoever you were just chatting with. Welcome, Ari. Welcome, Franny. This is great. So now I can prove we're distinct beings. Amazing. Okay, so I'm really excited. I hope you found those chats helpful and soothing and connective. So now we get to talk with our special guests. You have their incredible bios, which I'm not going to read. I like to just share a couple lines of how I met these two wonderful people, and just to give you all a little personal connection. So Imani, I'm grateful for a lot of your work. I'm specifically grateful for what I've learned working with you over the past couple of years, or year, I guess, your compassion, your insight, your nuanced conversations. I've met Imani through, we both serve on the board of Jewish Studio Project. Imani does incredible DEI work. She's an incredible educator. There's lots of overlap in our work, especially, and I think more recently around spiritual leadership, spiritual equity, and educational innovation. So thank you, Imani, so much for being here. Becky, I've known a little bit longer. Becky actually brought me on to the Jewish Studio Project board. I'm incredibly grateful, Becky, for your pastoral care, your board leadership, which I have learned so much from, and your teaching pedagogy. Again, I met Becky through JSP. We've been in a few different groups, Whiteness Havruta, a community gathering project we did, lots of board stuff, and our work also overlaps in the spiritual equity space and some other related projects. So thank you, Becky, for being here. And then together, I just want to, why the two of you? You both are incredibly smart, successful, visionary leaders. You have incredible histories and intersectional identities, both with vast experience working on boards and working for boards through COVID, through social justice movements, within and outside the Jewish community, progressive movements, DEI spaces and places. So again, I just want to keep adding and throwing on the kavod. Very lucky and honored to be in conversation with you both today. So welcome. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to start with just a few questions that I'd love to ask the two of you, maybe for 20 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the group for other questions. And the way we'll do that is, in fact, if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll probably take a few, toward the end, and then we'll play dealer's choice in terms of what folks want to respond to. So I'm going to start with the same question to both of you. And Imani, maybe I'll just start with you. What are the values guiding your decision-making these days?
Thanks, Seth. It's so good to be here with you and Becky. Feels like a much warmer room and a much warmer ecosystem with you both in it. I want to do a little bit of preamble before I answer the question about values, which is to say that one of the things that has become more acute recently is the limitations and imperfection of language. So I will land on some words, and those words may have meanings and interpretations that are different externally than internally, and also may provoke people to decide about my ideology. This feels important to say in particular because this is being recorded, something that anybody who knows with me, I do very rarely and leanly. And in part, it's because, oh my gosh, of course we want to record, because the more people who are in the conversation are able to learn together, the better. But also recording has a certain permanence to it, that if you meet a person a month later or a year later or 10 years later, sometimes they have moved, but your reception of them is that one interaction or video that you saw of them. And so based on the RSVP list, it looks like most people will have actually be listening to this at a time that's not this moment and is not in relationship. And usually I cite my sources, like I learned this from this person, or I learned that from this person. I'll probably do less of that here because, people are having extreme responses, doxing, being fired, etc., around not even the core of these issues, but the outside of the issues. I just wanted to say that as a way to say, hey, y'all, if you're listening to the recording, I may have grown and learned things since the last time we talked. So these are the values that are guiding me. My core value always is shlemut, right? Wholeness, whole inside of myself and whole with my community and communities. Ve'ahavta, and you will love, and you will love, and you will love, and you will love. And I put that in the context too of what I've been learning from Inside Out Wisdom and Action with David Jaffe and Yehuda Webster, which is around the balance of care, right? That I will have love for with Hashem, with myself, with my fellows, with my opponents, right? So that we are all community together. Kavod habriot, right? Respect for the dignity of other people and all people. So those are some of the values that I'm continuing really to use. Not much has changed.
Thanks, Imani.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. And I put, I'm a participant in the Iowa project, one of their classes right now. So big fan of Yehuda and Lindsay. Shout out and put their work in the chat. Becky, can I ask you the same question to talk about the values guiding your decision-making these days?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say to Imani's preamble, knowing you, I know that, and myself, I'm sure we both will have learned things by the time folks are listening to this video, big, little, or otherwise there. Some of the things I'm thinking about in my decisioning these days are, well, I'll just name the big one first, like Torah. And that's not a value. That's in some ways that's a throwaway answer because it involves everything, but also in some ways it's very particular to just how I move through the world as a rabbi and a lover of Torah. So thinking about just like how is what I'm doing right now an embodiment of living Torah, or a blog post coming out later today about being in service of the divine. So those are that's the overall frame. I think within that, thinking about how whether this particular decision or moment is uplifting dignity of myself, of other people, of the earth. Am I exercising compassion and curiosity? Am I showing up in a way that will further relationship or might sever relationship? And then also thinking about accountability and to whom I'm accountable in any given moment and context. I don't think any of those were values, but they are all what I'm thinking about in decision making.
I disagree. I disagree. I think some of those are values. Thanks, Becky.
Great.
I tend to think about, I'll answer the question briefly, that compassion and curiosity and courage, I think, tend to be, in my mind, those are values. So I'll underline a few of those as values. Becky, just stick with you for a sec. Let's just talk more specifically about board service. Can you tell us a little how board service currently fits into your work and your leadership these days?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Seth. I think I was sharing in my one-on-one with Mickey that board service sometimes feels weird to me, and it feels weird in reference to this question, which is why I'm glad we decided you would ask it, because it actually is how I spend a good amount of my time, and how over the last 5 years, or maybe even 5-7 years of my professional career, board service has been a staple of that, right? Making time to chair the Sfara board, which I no longer chair, having moved on to faculty there, the JSP board, being on the Keshet board. I'm going to hop onto the Shalom Center board in, I don't know, I think the meeting's in 2 weeks. Still waiting on the calendar invite. If you're watching this, Nate the Groot, I love them and really feel excited about stepping into being able to support Rabbi Arthur Waskow's legacy and the work that the beautiful Torah he brings into the world and we can all bring into the world. And so it feels like really a central piece of my professional life. And it feels like the place where I most often exercise the muscles of thinking about organizational leadership, organizational growth, strategic planning, fundraising, and all of those sort of fun, right, board responsible things. And in this moment, and maybe that's being, I think perhaps actually consistently throughout, also thinking about how the boards that I'm on have been approaching questions of equity and diversity, and both within the context of our decision making and the power we have as a structure, and also how those values impact organizational growth, et cetera, and programming, and all the juicy things too.
It's Becky.
Yeah.
Imani, feel free to riff on that. A secondary question would be, and again to both of you, but start with Imani, is what's particularly hard about navigating this crisis? You both sit in progressive funder circles, DEI circles. Can you lift up a few things that have been particularly hard about this over the last couple months now?
Sure. I would say I'm always going to say something like the last couple of months, depending on how you move. Right? So the last couple of months, the last couple of years, and so on. The entry points are really different for many of us. I just want to underscore that that you all, with your little alliterations, were kind of riffing on the 8 C's of self by Dick Schwartz and internal family systems, which are compassion, curiosity, clarity, creativity, calm, confidence, courage, and connectedness. So when we're really like inside of ourselves, we have access to, it doesn't have to be 100%, but 15%-ish, we have access to these things. It means that we can do a lot ourselves and together. So I just want to offer that from my clinical training. I'm actually going to bite at the second question because I think there'll be more questions and I want to share the love. I will say that one of the biggest challenges around navigating the crisis is that the frequency of vibration in our spheres is high. For some people, higher than ever. For some people that was Mike Brown, or for some people that was Trayvon Martin. For some people it's this. And for some people it's all of those things. And so people that we hurt are hurting. People we love are hurting. People that we love are hurting, and that makes it hard. It makes it hard to move. Just on a neurological level. I think for some funders and leaders, it actually hasn't been significantly more hard, in part because they continue to do mission aligned work. They know how to be mission aligned and they are doing it. And that doesn't mean that individuals within the organization aren't doing other things, or pockets of the organization aren't doing other things, but the organization itself is clear about what their mission is, and they continue to do it, and they continue to do it well, as it's embodied by the people that make the organization moving forward possible. For some, and also some people have already developed the muscle memory of having hard conversations, and other folks haven't. Like they've already, like part of how they do the work that they do is through authenticity and difficult conversations and discernment and productive conflict. And that muscle is in place or developing. And so it doesn't feel quite as hard as it might. I think some of the, talk about the precarity of leadership is that the positions that folks are taking can feel like they may jeopardize our credibility with some people or another. And making the choices about with whom is challenging. But it doesn't feel like we can avoid it, like we can sidestep it. And I would say for some leaders and funders, it's hard because there's been a fault line that we've attended to or we haven't. that Israel-Palestine has been a third rail conversation in every organization I've ever been in that is Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
That people have a divergent analysis, not just different, divergent. That people have differing proximities to community. That we are unhealed in a lot of ways, unhealed inside of ourselves and also unhealed kind of collectively and unpracticed. One of my favorite little tidbits about the amygdala is that when we are having, a fight, flight, flop response in our bodies, our middle ear ceases to work. We can hear high tones and we can hear low tones, but we can't hear middle. Middle, I have to say middle / nuance / right. Like that physiologically, we are attuned to something high pitched or something low guttural, right? I think other things that can make it challenging is the conflation of different issues. I remember in different political moments in the history of our country, if I heard somebody say X, I would be like, so you don't care about me.
Mm.
And that could be true, but it also could not be true. You don't capitalize Black. I know what that says about you. I mean, so there's, and the sense of urgency that we feel makes all of that conflation and implicit associations much more active. So I think those are some of the things that can make it hard for some folks. I've one of the things that I've found really such a blessing for me is that I have been able to be most of myself in all of the places where I've always been most of myself over the past 2 months. And that a lot of people I know don't have that right now. And so that feels good.
That's beautiful. Can you share a minute, just 30 more seconds on why or how have you been able to craft that? That's a beautiful sentiment to say you can show up or feel comfortable or safe in all of these settings. How have you been able to do that?
I mean, I've spent my life doing it. I've spent my life building the communities that I'm in now, that I'm in where I am myself. To be clear, not every place. That is not safe. That has not ever been safe. I'm not saying it's not safe in the last 2 months. That has never been the case. And I come from parents who know how to build community. They spent their lives building community. I know what it means when people love you, when people will throw down for you, when people will be there for you, when even if you disagree, they will not abandon you. I know what love looks like. And I know that love looks like, as Cornel West says, like, justice is what love looks like in public. Like, I know what it looks like. And so I've had the blessing and the example of my family, and I've learned how to build it myself. And really a lot of that has to do with my relationship with my higher power. So.
Thank you.
Seth, maybe I'll put my own texture to some of the things Imani shared about some moments of friction, struggle, whatever word we want to put in there. One is to think about the various organizations I've been in touch with who have, said something or not said something, right? Imani talked about places moving forward who are doing mission aligned work and are always doing mission aligned work and having the clarity to be like, oh, JSP I think is actually a good example of this. Like, here's what we do, right? We create space and have a process that helps people move out of our cerebral cortex and into our bodies and other parts of our brain, right? To navigate complexity and overwhelming feelings and all sorts of other things. So we're going to do it, right? And the act of doing it is the proverbial statement that we might have put out, right? Or I imagine other organizations where putting out statements could be hard things, or are always hard things. I think about actually the work the JSP board did around our racial equity, right? We didn't use the word statement. I don't remember what word we used, right? But around that document that's now up on the mission. Maybe we did use mission statement. That's up on, thank you, Seth. That's up on the website. But even knowing that right, that maybe that would have been or would be a place where we have exercised our muscles as a board in doing things that are complicated and hard and having hard conversations, or maybe just a place where we did it once and hopefully learned a few things. I think also, as I'm thinking about, you know, the roles that boards play in my life, and also thinking about how I show up elsewhere, it is true that there are moments in which I have felt, and other board members might feel, like a liability to organizations, right? That my politics and my putting out, signing onto a blog post for at the Center of Effective Philanthropy, or signing on to Rabbis for Ceasefire, might actually jeopardize the funding of the organizations that whom I serve, largely from a space of love. And so I think being able to surface those conversations are, you know, that's one example of a hard conversation that folks on boards may need to have. Both, I think, from an accepting of that. You know, we had a funny moment where I was like, I'll step off the JSP board if I have to. So the accepting of that being a reality, and also the unpacking of where the right values aligned action might be in that moment. And I imagine there are folks on this call who are like, what? That's not a thing. And there are Jewish funders who are withdrawing funding from organizations in this moment, and walking boards through the tightrope feels very thin, but maybe tightrope of fiduciary responsibility, and also value centering in decision making is hard work, and is not just about organizational financial security, but is also about the ways in which, as Imani named so specifically, right, the ways in which we're each hurting, and people are hurting, because what are organizations, right, if not collectives of people doing work, and with all of what they bring, consciously or unconsciously. So those are just a few specific examples that I'm thinking of as I think about just like where I sit in this moment as an individual, and a rabbi, and a board member.
Appreciate that.
Becky, you're reminding me too. My Ride It Our partner, Franny Silverman, is on the call. We've been talking a lot about doing and being, and what does it mean to be an organization that stands for something but doesn't embody it in the way that internally staff is being treated and held to do the work of outside offering and giving. And I think that the mission aligned piece has to not just go out into programming, it needs to come inside into culture and identity. And that as people are having some challenging conversations, that's another place where organizations are making choices about speed, intimacy, depth, courage, that really is, you know, coming manifest right now.
Thanks, Imani. Thanks, Becky. I just want to pause for a second and welcome questions in the chat. Welcome questions with a hand raise. I certainly have a whole bunch of more questions, but I want to make sure folks who are here get their questions answered. So I'll take a quick peek to see if anyone wants to throw anything out now, or else I'll keep going. Okay, maybe one or two more questions, and some others will pop on. Becky, you kind of got to this, but maybe this is, that you were talking about funders and fundraising and the values. How are you thinking about the balance between, or the balance of values and fundraising? Is there anything more that you want to add to that, or that as a board member? Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, I'm thinking about a lot of things, both as a board member and also someone who is organizing in philanthropic spaces. There, I mean, organizing wealthy folks to move money to in service of racial justice, gender justice, environmental justice, and just the questions of how we're navigating shifting priorities are we navigating are people shifting priorities? Are individual donors shifting priorities? Are foundations and institutional funders shifting priorities? Are different, how are we as a board thinking about what story we're telling in this moment? Is it the same story because it's actually the work we do? Or is there a different story? Are we able to stand firmly, am I, in our position or from our orientation to bring the funds in that we need to? And are we going to be in a moment of having to ask hard decisions because our community is in crisis? And how do we do that, right? Trying to think of a specific, I think a specific example is seeing lots of funders, at least I know, and lots is maybe an exaggeration. Maybe I'm doing the thing where people are like, Rabbi, everybody's saying this. And like, everybody, or you and the 3 people you sat with at Kiddush on Shabbos, right? Or whatever it is, whatever version of that is, you and, me and my group chat with my spouse, or suddenly everybody. But I do know of funders, right, who have been shifting slowly since 2016, shifting resources to democracy-oriented work. So in the last 3 years have shifted money, have infused money into racial equity work and are shifting money away from there, who are in this moment moving money to critical needs in Israel and in Palestine. And also there are, money is abundant and not infinite. And so how are we approaching those folks? And we've seen those calls in like EJP, right? That are like more money to more things, and that's the way. And so how are we helping people convince folks that that's the right narrative is a thing I've been thinking about. That now is a moment to maybe to be pushing ourselves to give more, to speak out more, and not to shrink, and to do so from a values with a strong values proposition. And look, the question is always on my mind, what's going to happen if an org loses $100,000 gift, which has happened from an individual donor, and so a program area has to shrink? How are we as a board able to support our leaders in that moment? And I don't know the answer there. Still muddling my way through that one. Not as a board member, but as a friend of staff there.
Thanks, Becky. Imani, you have reflections on that question as well?
I'm thinking a lot about the way that the funding bubble, the post George Floyd's murder funding bubble and DEI has disappeared all but. And the work is just beginning to begin. I'm thinking a lot about how the organizational structures that can contribute to DEI work going well often pivots if anything emerges in Israel Palestine. Happened in Pesach 2018, happened in May 2021, happened again now. That there really is it's very challenging for folks to hold both, although we are capable of it. It is challenging. And I was thinking about like from whom we accept money, from whom we write grants, we try out, we audition, and then people say, yes, I will fund you for X amount of time, for X amount of money, etc. And I think sometimes when we look at the profile of the people who are funding us, 2 things I think about. The first is sometimes we look at the loveliness of getting funded, but we're being funded by somebody who also funds other things that are not values aligned for the organization. And for some people, they're like, of course I'm going to take the money. They're offering money, and if this is what they want to offer it for, I'm going to take it. And other people are like, well, I don't want to take money if they're also offering, if we're going to end up on a list with also these people, so that can be that has always been a challenge, I think, but it's increasing now. And then a concept that a colleague really invited me into last summer when we were together, who's in philanthropy, she said, oftentimes foundations are funding us and our opposite. Right. So when money is going like this, it is funding ideologically aligned stuff for us, but also they are funding things that can subordinate us or sabotage us. And so like, what is it? Those choices also are very challenging, I think. And I think we'll see more conversation around that forthcoming.
I appreciate that. I hadn't thought of that at least on the surface, kind of contradictory dollars going to organizations that might be undermining work.
Mm-hmm.
Dana, you have a great question in here. I wonder if you want to just lift that up or speak it out loud.
Sure. So you all saw what I wrote in the chat, presumably. We have a small organization, and I feel in the last, to Imani's point about time, 6 weeks / 3 years, we've had to constantly pivot and make decisions and go new directions and respond to the newest thing. And some of that has to do with funding and needing to present ourselves as being responsive to the moment in order to, secure the dollars we need. And then I worry. I mean, I listen to the beautiful, insightful way that Imani and Becky are talking about values-based decisions. And I wonder, are we making values-based decisions, or are we just making quick, good enough decisions? So I just wondered if either of you had any reflection about that.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dana. I think the incredible opportunity that a sense of urgency gives us is to remember when there is less urgency to try to practice these things as much as possible. So this is not a now recommendation, but it is, how much muscle can we build before we need to, lift the car, so to speak, so that when we're there, we know how we roll together. We know how we be together. We know how we decide together. We know what to happen when trust has been breached. We know how to come back to one another. And the other thing is, there's a difference between small and large and flat and hierarchical. So one doesn't necessarily mean the other. There isn't necessarily intimacy and trust because an organization is small, and vice versa. Like it could be big and there could be a lot of intimacy and trust. And so I think I like the idea of always keeping the organization's mission and values in sight at the top of every meeting, right? That it really is something that only happens with practice, and everybody needs to be able to embody it. So I can't speak specifically to the organizational decisions, of any organization, but I will say that it is easy for our kishkas to start making decisions for everybody, right? And for our amygdalas to start making decisions for everybody. And I think to have real people that you work with, that you can say, we have a habit of giving and receiving feedback in this organization. I am pulling feedback now. I need to have some feedback on this. And I am prepared to hear what you have to say to me about this, even if I have to go away and walk away and think about it and discern with other people I trust, and then bring it back to myself and my spirit and how it sits, and read the mission statement 4 more times. That's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say from my experience of working with Jeff at JSP and being a board chair at SFAR too, that around quick decisions, I think the thing I like to encourage folks to remember is that board members, regardless of the size of donor they are, even if they're like your largest donor, are there because they love the organization, and to lean into that trust and be transparent and communicate in ways that are clear and direct about what the role of the board is, why we're moving so quickly, and what the decision was, and when there will be room for a conversation, so that things can at least be laid out on a proverbial table. Because I think so often we get caught up in what's the right narrative or spin or anything externally, and the board is in a funny role, right? Part internal, part external. And it's just weird. But I think in a moment where we're moving quickly and making decisions and in crisis, it can be a good moment to err on the side of trust and transparency with your board. That also, could bite you in the ass, but but at least that's the approach that I have always favored.
Thanks, Becky and Imani. Thanks for that question, Dana.
I want to just add, in terms of talking with the board, one of the things I think, even when it does bite you in the ass, I think it gives you a preview of how it will be received as inside outside people. It's like, yes, I would rather have this conversation with the VP of the board and try to get my ducks in a row now, as I will be fielding more feedback from a larger community.
Thanks, Imani. I'll pause again for any vocal questions that folks have here.
I have a question if I could start by naming an assumption. So I would posit or assume that in any time of crisis, the extent to which the board is aligned with each other and with the staff leadership, and the staff is aligned with board leadership, if that alignment exists, they're able to sort of move through the crisis with more ease. So I'd love to know if y'all like agree with that assumption or would add, poke any holes or add onto it. But to what extent, or what is that alignment? What factors lead to that alignment? And where that alignment is lacking, what is usually missing?
Thanks, Jeremy.
Becky, I'll follow you.
Here I was being like, that's an Imani question. I largely agree with that, with the assumption that when folks are in alignment, we can move more quickly or more smoothly. And also want to poke a hole. Yeah, often I'm not sure we fall out of alignment in these moments, or the places where we're not in alignment becomes clear, right? And so we can be in alignment and then be like, oh, this actually really challenges that alignment. Maybe we're not so much in alignment. And I think what's helpful in that moment is actually then something is opened up in sort of the same way that feedback from a board member is helpful. You'd rather hash it out there than with the external world. Like, it's good to see where we're not in alignment and to dig in if we have time and space. In moments of crisis, we don't always have that time and space. I think then this is going to be same as my last question, right? We can name where we're not in alignment and what we're working out of, and make sure that we are thoughtfully circling back to whatever that moment of friction is. What can we do to foster alignment? I think is the work of the ages in some ways. But I think setting ourselves up, something I've learned from Seth about solid board meetings is that the more generative, right, and strategic the conversations, the more interesting the board meeting is going to be, the more helpful it's going to be for the organization, and the more we're going to actually learn from the wisdom of who's in the room, both as individuals and as the collective, collective board. And so I think, in some ways, the project of being in alignment is a generative project, right? So what's the thing we want to be in alignment with? Is it a values-based thing? And so we need to jump in and talk more about I'm trying to think of something that's governance and not managing. And of course, now I'm completely blanking. Bad moment to blank, right? But is it about how we recruit members for the board, and that we need to have alignment actually at a very 10,000 foot level, and understanding the role of socioeconomic status and level of wealth in board recruitment? And what is that conversation could be a proxy for any number of other conversations, but thinking about taking one area and digging in and seeing what folks are feeling and thinking and seeing and feeling and asserting is, I think, a good project for building alignment, and also for stretching the muscles of being in alignment. such that, if we're talking about board stuff, sometimes board stuff feels less fraught than programmatic things. So if we can have a conversation about what we're bringing to board recruitment as a board, then perhaps we can also have a conversation about how we're prioritizing funds throughout the organization and seek alignment that way around those issues too, which can feel sometimes a wee bit stickier.
Wee bit.
Wee bit.
Becky, you're reminding me, I've been now through with clients of mine, maybe 4 or 5 board nominations processes in the last year or 2. And I think some of the challenging stuff can be really the questions that people have that belie in some ideological biases that, when you say wealth and how much wealth people have, there can be contradictions, there can be conflations of identity and wealth, and people don't know. And then they say, well, I mean, if the board gets more diverse, then will we be poor? And what does that mean? And they don't usually say it like that, but that's what underlies it. And then people are like, wait, how do we even respond to this question? And also I had that question too. And now I think it's not the right, you shouldn't have said that, but also I don't know the answer to it. So how do we get information? I was talking with a client earlier this week who was on staff and was talking about not wanting to be, was worried that they were going to be perceived as anti-Semitic and because they're pacifist. And it was the bigger context. And they were like, but I don't even know who to ask my question to. Like, I don't, what if it's the wrong question or the wrong person, So in terms of alignment, I think about, where do we have alignment? It often in the objective, but not often in the methodology. I think about Malcolm X, MLK, Marcus Garvey. I think about Booker T. Washington and W.E. Du Bois. Like, did they think that Black people should be free? Yes. Did they agree about how? They did not. And as soon as they started to agree, they were taken out. Let's be clear, right? So having alignment sometimes also can be a challenge. But I would say, boards and staff are often unknown to each other. In my experience, they don't know each other. So having alignment is challenging in that way, or knowing whether you have alignment, you may, but if you're unknown to each other, it makes it, I think, pretty challenging. I'll even though it's 3 minutes, I'm going to take a fork and I'm going to say this. DEI board work, people are often afraid. They're like, they don't know how much grieving they have to do. They're worried about being decentered. They're worried that they're only there because they have money, and that is, if organizations could get the money some other way, they would, and they would discard them. And that is, nobody says it like that again, but that's maybe we're actually not invested in having everybody at the table. Maybe we're invested in only having other people at the table and not you people who have been here so long, who've built up this organization. And so people work with a lot of fear in that place, but they don't know necessarily that it's fear. They think that, as we make the circle bigger, it's harder to touch across the circle, but then more people are in it. And a lot of people really like this model better when we all knew each other and we all were kind of the same and similar. And it's hard to lose that. And it's important to grieve that. And it's important to celebrate what can come further. In terms of alignment and Israel-Palestine, we have to know how our people are thinking about things and what touches them. Otherwise, it's a huge loss of connection and liability, I think. I had the opportunity 2 years ago, for the first time, I stepped into doing an engagement around Israel-Palestine for the first time. And it was a board they were like, we need to know more about each other. It was not a time of crisis. They were like, we need to know what's at risk for us, how we feel, what it means. And they took the time to do it. And it was beautiful. They were inspiring to me.
I love that. Thank you, Imani. And thank you, Becky. And I know we're a minute before time. I'd love to wrap there with just a closing of gratitude to the two of you. What I heard just in the last 60 minutes around, alignment and value, centering values, and the challenges and opportunities around recruitment, the hurt and fear we all have and that we don't know about, the trust and transparency that is paramount to all of this. And like you just said, Imani, that we have to know our people. We have to know who we are in relationship with, who we are governing with. One of my through lines in my board governance work is all just about relationship building. And I think that's, another way of saying that is just knowing our people. So I thank you both. Thank you all. Just a pitch, January 19th is our next board talk with Rachel Shumek and Libby Jacobson. Rachel's the founding CEO of Swipe Out Hunger, and Libby Jacobson is the founding board chair of Swipe Out. If you have any feedback on people, ideas, or topics for board talk, please let me know. And wishing you a restful weekend and a Shabbat Shalom and some Shleimut. Thanks to you all.
Thanks.
Thanks. Sweet.